Have you ever stopped to think about why, at certain times, things don't seem to flow as they should? That feeling that something is out of place, that blessings are slow to arrive, or that struggles seem endless. Sometimes we spend so much time trying to adjust life our own way that we forget the essential: God. He is the source of everything. When we put God first, everything else finds its proper place. This is a principle we find repeatedly in the scriptures. From ancient times, God has been faithful to his people. He never changes. His word is eternal, his presence is constant, and his promises are true. But if God remains the same, why do we so often feel disconnected from him? The truth is, we are the ones who change. We get distracted by the demands of life, worries, and worldly priorities, and we end up taking God out of the center. But what happens when we put God in his rightful place, at the top of everything? Putting God first transforms everything. The Bible teaches us in Matthew 6, verse 33, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." This passage is clear and direct. When we prioritize God, he takes care of all the other areas of our lives. It is not just a spiritual invitation, but a concrete promise. If you align your life with God's will, he will take care of all your needs: material, emotional, spiritual. When we put God first, our worldview changes. We start to see problems differently. Instead of despairing in the face of difficulties, we trust that God already has a plan. This doesn't mean the problems will disappear, but it does mean we don't face these battles alone. God is with us, leading every step. The question is, have we allowed him to lead, or are we trying to do everything in our own strength? Often, the chaos in our lives is a reflection of spiritual disorder. We place our worries, work, relationships, or even our desires above God. And when these foundations fail, we feel the weight of frustration. However, when we realign our hearts and allow God to be at the center, he rearranges everything. This is the true transformation that occurs when we prioritize his presence in our lives. God never changes, we do. Hebrews 13 verse 8 reminds us that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God does not change. His character is unchanging, his goodness is constant, and his love is infinite. But if God remains the same, why do we sometimes feel like he is distant? The answer lies in the change within us. The human heart is volatile, easily distracted by circumstances and the busyness of life. At the beginning of our walk with God, we are often full of fervor. We want to know more about him, seek his presence intensely, and have a vibrant relationship. But as time goes on, other things start to take up our attention. The worries of everyday life, external pressures, and our own desires can pull us away from God's presence. It's not that he has changed or stopped loving us, but that we have, little by little, allowed other things to take his place in our lives. The prophet Jeremiah, in Lamentations 3 verses 22 to 23, states, "Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning." This is proof of God's unchanging character. Even when we drift away, he remains faithful. His mercies are renewed every day. But we must choose to return to him, to put him first again, because it is our distance that creates the emptiness, not God's absence. The secret of fulfillment is in God. Often, we seek happiness, success, and fulfillment in other sources, in our careers, in material possessions, in relationships. While these things can provide moments of joy, they can never offer the fullness that only God can give. Psalm 16 verse 11 says, "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." True joy and satisfaction come from being in God's presence. When we put God first, he fills the voids that the things of this world cannot. This does not mean we must abandon our dreams, goals, or relationships, but it means we must surrender them to God. When we surrender everything to him, he guides us along the best path and gives us the peace that surpasses all understanding, as stated in Philippians 4 verse 7. Putting God first is not just a religious act, but a daily decision. It is about trusting that He knows what is best for us, even when we do not understand what is happening. And in this trust, we find rest and security. If you feel that your life has been out of balance, perhaps it is time to reassess your priorities. God has never ceased to be available to you. He never changed. His presence, His promises, and His love remain as strong and powerful as ever. But perhaps, amid the demands and distractions of life, you have shifted your focus. God desires to be at the center of your life. He wants to be the foundation upon which you build your dreams, relationships, and future. When you put God first, He also puts you in a place of honor, blesses you, guards you, and leads you. This is the promise for those who trust and surrender their lives to Him. So today is the day to return. It is time to realign your priorities and put God in His rightful place. And by doing so, you will experience the fullness that only He can provide. When you put God first, your perspective changes. The challenges that once seemed insurmountable become opportunities to see God's power in action. The storms of life do not disappear, but you begin to face them with renewed confidence, knowing that the Lord of hosts is ahead of you, fighting for you. The promise of God's presence. God promises us in several parts of the Bible that He will never leave us nor forsake us. In Deuteronomy 31 verse 6, we read, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." This is a truth that transcends time. God is not like people who come and go in our lives. He is constant. He is faithful. When we decide to put God at the center, we are not just talking about a religious practice or a spiritual routine. We're talking about a posture of the heart. It is about living each day with the awareness that He is by our side, that His presence is with us in every decision, every thought, and every situation. Often, our greatest difficulty is remembering that God is already by our side. We want to solve everything with our own strength, and when we fail, we feel abandoned. But God never left. He has always been there, waiting for us to hand over our burdens to Him. Jesus invites us in Matthew 11 verse 28, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This is a direct call. When we prioritize God, we find rest and relief from life's burdens. The reward of obedience in prioritizing God. Putting God first is an act of obedience, and obedience brings blessings. In Deuteronomy 28, the Bible speaks about the blessings that will follow those who obey God. And all these blessings will come upon you and overtake you if you obey the voice of the Lord your God. God's blessings are not limited to one aspect of life. When we put Him first, He blesses our work, our health, our families, our relationships, and our future. But these blessings are not just material. The greatest reward of putting God first is God Himself. It is His constant presence, His care, and His unconditional love. It is living with the certainty that regardless of what happens, He is with us, guiding, strengthening, and sustaining us. One of the greatest examples of someone who put God first is King David. Even amid mistakes and failures, David always sought God. He wrote in Psalm 27 verse 4, "One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek Him in His temple." David understood that more than riches or power, the greatest good anyone can have is the presence of God. The call to restoration. If today you realize that you have drifted away from God, that He has not been your priority as He should be, remember that there is still time to return. God is always ready to welcome us back with open arms. In Joel 2 verses 12 to 13, He makes a powerful invitation. "Even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. Rend your heart and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for He is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, and He relents from sending calamity." No matter how far you have wandered, God is not changed. He is the same God who walked with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses. The same God who went into battle with David is the same one who is available for you today. What he desires is your heart, your sincerity, your total surrender. And when you do this, he will place you in a place of honor because he exalts those who humble themselves before him. Putting God first is a call to transformation. It is